E te wira tēnā koutou. Koutou nei are taringa mai nei ki tēneki, e ara mai nei te kōrero atu ai ki o koutou mo te wākainga. O te noe e te, o ki marau te kia rātu nei kupu atu ai ki runga i te manuhiri o ki o wākainga. O ki atu rai ki o koutou kāinga, ki reira, waka Parihaka mai ai. I tara nei, kei aku e ngā kupu kōrero, mo te mā tātua te motu i taua wā, tēnei rā te mā tātua katorika e tuaka nei tēnei wā tonu. Nā rere, kare tuaka nei te mihi ki a koe mo tēnā tu āwatanga. Mo i ara rā te kā uipo i roti a koe me te taonga te pokapoka nei nā me ana kōrero. Nā rere, kare tōre te kupu, tēnā koe, tēnā koutou. E te iwi rā. Just like to say, on behalf of Caritas and the people that are gathered here today, Ruakere comes from a place, o Taranaki, and there we had what we called the mātātua o te motu. It was the face of God at that particular point in time. That was the Māori word that they used for Parihaka. Today he comes, he gives us reflections from the past to look forward to the future. And we today are the mātātua of the Catholic community in Aotearoa. Nā reiri, kia koutou katoa, tēnā koutou, kei a koe te waiate.
E puawai au no runga I te tikanga he rau renga no roto I te raukura. Ko taku raukura he manawa nui ki te ao. Me manawa nui anō ki mua I a koutou e aku rangatira mai ngā kura o te hāhi katorika o te motu. E pūkei nei te tini o ngā tamariki ngā mokopuna ki tō koutou waroaro. Anā te miharo, anō o te taimahatanga o tēnei te hāpai I ngā kōrero o te maunga rongo ki runga ki te whenua, te maunga rongo ki runga ki te tangata. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. It is a great honour to be here. In actual fact, this is the first time I've spoken to such a group. I don't know which side to look. Look way off in the distance over there or way off in the distance in this area. But I'm here to talk about Parihaka and this pile of resource on the table beside me. Perhaps it's wrong to make an assumption. The assumption is that people know about Parihaka. But perhaps it is appropriate to make that assumption in a room full of educationalists and people who, I believe, share very similar values around peace, around caring, and about empowerment of people who are in need of that empowerment. Parihaka is a place on the westernmost tip of Taranaki, of the Taranaki region, and it was led by two people by the names of Tohu Kākai and Te Whiti o Rongomai. They were two leaders who were born into conflict. It is said that on the eve of the battle at which Tohu Kākai was killed, his son was born, and that was Te Whiti o Rongomai. As a consequence of his father's death, the name Tohu Kākai was then passed to his uncle, his father's cousin, who was born not long after, who was given the name Tohu Kākai. It was a connection that stayed with them through their lives. And they grew up in a time of extreme hardship, of conflict initially from tribes from the north, and then later with conflict with the government. They found their direction in teachings and principles based in the Bible. They also found principles in traditional concepts of community and of identity. When we talk about Parihaka, most people will reflect or will think about protest, will think about resistance. In actual fact, we tend not to emphasize that element of Parihaka because the Parihaka that we know and the Parihaka we focus on is the Parihaka which is providing sanctuary to the refugees of the warfare that began in 1860 on the 17th of March. In actual fact, Parihaka that we know of, that we have today is a community that was attacked on 4 separate occasions prior to the establishment of the site in Parihaka. They were attacked in Warea, which was a principal economic development where tohu e te whiti were leaders in waiting. They were attacked in Ngā Kumikume, they were attacked at Kekeua, and then they were attacked also at Waikoko. These were all peaceful settlements focused primarily on the cultivation, on agriculture as the focus for peaceful activity. They believed that by engaging in that activity, they would demonstrate to the Crown that they were not interested in conflict, that they wanted to live in peace and to work out a relationship where both Māori and Pākehā could be respected in this country. That continued up until the point at which the Crown began to enact the confiscation of land. Land was confiscated in Taranaki in 1865 with the West Coast Settlement Act. 1.275 million acres of land was confiscated from Taranaki as a punishment for engaging in warfare. It was a warfare that began in Waitara in 1860, and within 10 years of the beginning of the war, the government acknowledged that the war was started for wrongful, the reasons used were unjustified. However, by the time they came to that decision about the war in Taranaki, the level of conflict had escalated to such a point that there was no return. And the conflict continued through Taranaki and spread throughout the country into Waikato and other regions, which is regularly referred to as the New Zealand Wars. Most people associate Parihaka with the 1881 on the 5th of November, which just happens to be Guy Fawkes Day. 5th of November, this is the 410th anniversary of Guy Fawkes, the original act of Guy Fawkes. And on that day, 1,500 troops marched on the people of Parihaka, around 300, mainly women and children. Many of the men had been imprisoned for non-violent resistance against the Crown when the Crown enforced its confiscation of Taranaki lands. And they marched and they imprisoned many of the remaining men. They plundered the community of its valuables. They shipped off most of the other people from around the country who had come to support Parihaka from many other tribes around the country. They returned them back to the tribes where they were from as best they could place them. And the rest of the men were taken down and imprisoned down in the South Island. The troops then occupied Parihaka for up to 3 years. They built a fort within Parihaka called Fort Rolleston to commemorate the two ministers of the Crown who led the force into Parihaka at the time. No other battle has been led by ministers of the Crown, which is a pretty good indication that they weren't expecting much conflict. They understood that Parihaka was a peaceful settlement and wanted to engage and to find a resolution to what the Crown had undertaken within the Taranaki region. They understood also when they saw children in front of them that Parihaka wasn't going to escalate violence. They understood when they were next met by women carrying food that it was a demonstration of hospitality, not of conflict. And they understood when they came around the corner and people were sitting there quietly in unison, refusing to move. They were given an ultimatum of a few hours to start moving, or else the cannon that had quickly been hauled up on top of the nearby hill where Fort Rolleston was later built, and told that if they don't move, it will open fire and the Crown will not be held accountable for whatever death may result. The people held firm to their resolve, and they said, if one person moves, we are all lost. And at the end of that ultimatum, not a single person had moved, and for the next 13 days, they sat there silently and witnessed the removal of most of the people until there was probably only around 500 people were left in the community. And they stayed there until the men were returned some 3 years later. The story of Parihaka is the story that was, I suppose, acknowledged or recognized by Caritas when they approached Parihaka, talking about the use of Parihaka, the story of Parihaka as a learning opportunity for tamariki within schools, within Catholic schools. We jumped at that opportunity not simply because many schools over the years have come to Parihaka. And one of the difficulties we have is that many schools come to Parihaka, and normally what happens is we have a welcome, we have a historical presentation, they have a walk around Parihaka, we have a kai, and we say goodbye. That's how it normally happens with many schools that approach Parihaka. Nowadays we're a little bit more reluctant to accommodate those sorts of activities. And the key reason is that Parihaka is based not on a historical, is not a historical focus as far as we are concerned. Parihaka is based on legacy, and legacy isn't purely history. Legacy is based on principles that we enact in the here and now. Parihaka isn't just a history lesson. Parihaka is something that we seek to enact in this generation, not just in those people who whakapapa to Parihaka, but all of those who believe the principles that were established by Tohu and Te Whiti, things such as self-sufficiency, community development, conflict resolution by peaceful means, and mutual respect, no matter who the person is, no matter what status they believe they have. We all work together for a common goal. These are principles that are still very much valuable today. And those are the principles that were recognized by Caritas when they came and spoke to us some 4 years ago. It's been a long process to get to a point where we can put a resource in front of you. It's something that Parihaka has worked together with Caritas to produce. This hasn't been read a few history books, come upon, create a resource, and then come to Parihaka to see what we feel about it, again, which happens quite a bit. This is something right from the very beginning. Caritas came and sat down and spoke with Parihaka. What is the story you would like to see? The name of this book, this resource, is Parihaka, Past and Present. We hope that in the schools where it is utilized, the tamariki that have access to it consider not so much Parihaka as a history lesson, but as a lesson about principles of peace, of love, of caring, of empowerment that they will seek to enact in their lives. I stand and acknowledge Te Hāhi Katorika to all of those who made this, who empowered perhaps the workers of Caritas to come and to spend the amount of time it took to put this together. This isn't a big volume. The real volume of this are in the hands of the teachers who put this into practice. So the connection with the Catholic Church, the connection with the Bible, the connection with the teachings that I know you hold dear, I believe will find a common thread with what people of Parihaka are seeking to achieve in their lifetime today. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. E re re rā te motu nei ki roto ko ia o Parihaka nā tō ura waka aere mai ngā tikanga i tere pai pai ai te motu nei tō piki tanga kai te pure poto e ke tanga kai toro anui ki a wako rongo ko e ki te reka mai o te kōrero, ei, ei, ei. Mā tau tonua ki a koe e tō ue te ngākau, wakapuke tonu mea a iara e mauru, e ko te au kaweru, waka motu e iu ana kei te uru e kei te tonga. ka ara mai, I roto ka ko ari, ari, ei, ei, ei. Nō reira ka mihi atu au ki te rōpū o Caritas. You can see that these visits to Parihaka has not come unrewarded. The waiata we just sung was composed by Muaupoko. Those of you who know where Muaupoko are as a tribe in this country, based around Foxton, Levin, in that area, who were very strong supporters of Parihaka, particularly after most of their lands were swindled from them. They came to Parihaka and they sought solutions to the conflicts that they had, and they were there during the pāhua, and the clapping at the end sounds as though we're congratulating ourselves at how well we perform. In actual fact, it is a reflection of the three-armed present arms of the soldiers when they were in Parihaka. They regularly paraded in Parihaka to demonstrate the authority of the crown and its might in Parihaka while it was occupied. And so the waiata turns around that symbol, which would otherwise be one of disempowerment, and becomes a symbol of empowerment in this generation. We clap 3 times to remember we are still here today, we are still resolute, we are resilient, and we are finding solutions, innovative solutions to the difficulties we are faced with today. Caritas, ngā mihi rā kia koutou, o tira kia koutou katoa ngā kura, me te hāhi katorika e tū tonu ana I roto I tēnei ware. Tēnā tātou katoa.
E te whānau whakapono, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Hei kororia ki te atua I runga rawa. Hei mō nā ronga ki te whenua. Hei whakaoro pai ki nā tāngata katoa. Kia ora tātou. Thanks, Uakeri, for your fine introduction to a community, a place, a story, and this resource. When I was visited by the then Papal Nuncio in Christchurch asking me to become the Bishop of Palmerston North, we had lunch and he left and I went up to my study, pushed start of the computer, went to Google and typed in Palmerston North. I'd never been there. And in fact, I'd never really been anywhere in the diocese except through the desert road, driving from Wellington to Auckland. So my 4 years has been a time of discovery. And I think from what was for me, if you like, a sort of a blank slate, stories started to emerge. And the stories, of course, are always about people and place. You know, one of the more famous stories would be that of Suzanne Aubert. I reread Jessie Monroe's biography, and suddenly it became alive for me because the names, the place names, I was becoming familiar with. They were in the diocese in which I serve. And then another story was that of Francis Vernon Douglas. I knew nothing about him, but I realised one of my schools was named after that extraordinary priest. So another story emerged. Then more recently, a friend of mine who teaches in a rather posh Anglican girls' school in Christchurch, I was best man at their wedding, she emailed me and said, I think Parihaka is in your patch. And so I sort of went back to Google again, and Parihaka, as you say, I'd never heard of it. And this fascinating story began to emerge there too. So sometime later, I had the privilege of visiting the community with the seminary and seminary staff and students on a hikoi that they were making through the Palmerston North Diocese, and again got to delve deeper into the story. I'm not going to repeat it, obviously, but in this resource you'll find out what is a a fascinating part, not only of our history, but something which is living today. It's the origins, if you like, are, I think, one would need to acknowledge, a dark moment in our history. I was thinking of the sort of the land wars in Waitara, and then you come around the Taranaki coast and thinking, well, what's Parihaka got to do with this? And there'll be all sorts of theories that might explain that, but I think perhaps one simple explanation is that those four communities were so vibrant and, to use a slightly clinical word, so functional, that it was in their success that they became a threat to certain elements in the settlers' community and certain representatives of the Crown. So it has a very sort of dark, cynical origin, and I think, in this context we need to acknowledge that. But the story could have finished in a different way. The story continues today and tomorrow, and it is, within the context of our gathering here, a story of inspiration. Because what might have led to revenge didn't. And so in the prophets in Tohu and Te Whiti, they turned to the Old Testament prophets to inspire them and to the person of Jesus Christ as well, and came up with a solution, was the word that you used through Okere for today, but in their time too came up with a solution of resistance, which was peaceful. And so in the many social struggles that mark our nation, but perhaps our communities too, even within schools, here's an inspiring document, an inspiring story, which isn't from a museum, which is from a living community, and which we, through this resource and through the incredible work of Caritas in partnership, you saw at the Waiata, so many people have been involved. So this is a celebration story. It fits very well within our overall arching theme of Horizons of Hope. So it's my privilege as the Bishop of Palmerston North Diocese, which includes Taranaki, to launch together this document. So let's just for a moment turn to God and thank Him for all the blessings that He gives us in our life, in our history, in our today and our tomorrow. Let's deepen that resolve in each one of us to be people of peace, to be peacemakers. Let's thank God for the stories of inspiration in the history of Aotearoa. And let's ask Him now to bless these examples before us and the work that has gone into them and the mission that they will elicit within our schools as we resolve to take up this wonderful treasure and to share it with the communities that we all serve. So tēnā koutou, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.